Good morning, everybody. Now that the introductions are done, we are going to basically pave a path for you to the future of IoT. The stuff that you're going to learn today is going to be amazing. So sit back and enjoy this. And I think that anybody who says that the future is predictable is full of shit. So I want to preface that by saying that. So basically, I've just called this whole panel full of shit. Sorry, guys.
You didn't give us a heads up.
Yeah,
you have
I
no
was really
idea
nice
how
in
much
there,
shit I
right?
can
Yeah.
talk.
Sorry, Edward. You know, one of the things that I always preface any of these future of things is that I don't think that anybody predicted where we were going to be today, right? If you look around, you know, every single one of you now uses a smartphone as your first screen. Am I wrong there? Like, it is the most dominant device in your life. And 10 years ago, you would not have said that. Nobody would have said that. 20 years ago, there was no one predicting that. So I think that we take everything here as a continuum, as a path. And what I'm going to try to extract from these guys is maybe a little bit of deviation from that path, some interesting ideas. And this is an open forum. So if you have an idea or you have a question that you would like us to expand on, stand up, put your hand up, ask the question. Okay, that's what you're here for, to find out. But just always in continue. Oh, there's a mic over there. Now, I've had two examples where I think IoT has, gelled for me. And I think that, has everybody had one of those moments where you're like, oh, I get it now, right? Maybe all of you, because you're in this room, or are you still looking? This is a serious question, though, and I'm not going to continue until you answer it. So, is anybody in there had that moment where you're like, I either don't get it or I get it? Get it? All right. Jeez, this tough crowd. He was right. He came out there. So for me, it was two things. Waze. Have you ever used Waze as a navigation app? Simple thing. That is how I wanted to do it. Hands straight up. Waze for me was just another average way to get from the office to work, home to work. But what really cemented it for me was when it started doing traffic, real-time traffic, based on what? So many different connected people using the app on the Queensway. And in Ottawa, that's typically 2 or 3, not the 3,000 or 4,000 that do it in other cities. But it kind of gave you a sense that if the car, a friend of you, or down the way is going 20 kilometers an hour, it is probably traffic, right? So it was the beginning of this mesh network feel. But the real one that cemented for me was a guy by the name of Zach Supala, who actually runs a company that builds an IoT operating system called Spark. And he said that what enabled him, what got him thinking was that his father was deaf. My youngest brother is deaf, and so it resonated, obviously. And he said, how do you take somebody who is deaf and make them know when the doorbell rings? Right? It's a simple thing. It was a need that he had. He said that the doorbell rings, you could do anything. Vibrations, my brother has this, has an alarm clock that vibrates the entire house to wake up, so that if he doesn't, at least we do, and then we go and shake him, right? But what do you do with a deaf person when the doorbell rings? And what he came up with is the simplest of things, is that he connected a light in his house to the doorbell. It was 8 or 9 years ago. That was it. Somebody rings the doorbell, the light goes on or off, right? And then with Hugh, he was able to actually distinguish between the doorbell and the phone, right? Or the doorbell and somebody walking into his house. And then it got more sophisticated and he built that. That is probably the most elegant use of IoT that I had seen to that point, and we're going to expand on that. So those were my aha moments, and I'd implore you to think of yours, and maybe you'll have a few more here. So I'm going to open this up to the panel. I'm going to start with Brett here. Is that the start? Is that the best use case right now when you start to think about how this can be implemented, how IoT is going to kind of become part of the common language, I suppose?
Yeah, I think that we see it coming across in mobility a lot too, and I think that it's been happening for a while now with being able to, with integrated payments and being able to see use multimodal transportation from one mode to the next. I think that it comes across in mobility as well. Okay.
I mean, is there a tipping point that we've seen so far, or what will be the tipping point? Is there anybody that can talk to that? Is it, as we walk through this path, are these small instances going to be the thing that actually start to gain momentum for us to be able to understand how to use this day to day? Like, when do we start to...
I think there's two sides, really. So the example that you gave is very much need, and we see a lot of that already, where a user themselves has a need and they try to solve that. And we see a lot of that with the makerspace, a lot of do-it-yourselfers, even with the tweeting plant we created yesterday with some of you at the workshop. And that's very much, I have a need and I can solve it. It's accessible to me. I can come up with a solution. But there is the other side of it too, which is how businesses or even governments are approaching the same space of IoT and what kind of solutions they come up with, what kind of needs they see in either the public that they're serving or in the consumers that they're serving.
So go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to your point about whether we're at a tipping point yet. And I know that this is cliche to some of you, but I really love that quote from William Gibson, where he says that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed yet. So, like 1981, we see somebody hook up the internet at the time to a Coke machine, and it tells you if the Coke is cold, if it's there or not. And you're telling me, like, there's someone in your life who hooked up a light to the doorbell. Like, it's already here. And I don't know how important it is to distinguish whether we're at that tipping point yet. I think that it's just going to slowly creep into our lives and just become a ubiquitous thing, and we're probably not going to even notice it.
So if we're not going to notice it, which is a really interesting thing, right? It becomes fabric. I use the example we were talking behind, is that I can't walk into a store and ask for the Internet of Things. I can't go in and buy it, right? Like, can you imagine? Apple has not coined that yet, and they haven't owned it, and they don't package it yet, so we can't buy it. But the question is, I mean, what is it going to take? And Adrian, maybe you can help this. Is what is it going to take for us to be able to understand that it's there and then start using it effectively? What are the things that are going to make us want it?
Well, I think your example of that app Waze is a good example, which by itself is not a useful app unless there's a critical mass that's using it. And so you look at adaptation of new technologies with Internet of Things and things like that, it requires a critical mass. So you look at where it's being useful right now, and it's useful right now, businesses using it. So if you have a large business, they can impose, these small intelligent sensors and devices en masse and basically change the way that they operate. Okay, so you take a large company, they can do that. Walmart does that, for example. For consumers then to do it and see how it affects our lives, it needs to have that kind of critical mass, except it's not something that gets imposed upon us. It's something that we right now volunteer for. So in an application like that, unless there's enough people in Ottawa that says, I'm going to use this application, it's not very useful. Now, we see this in other things like the internet, even things like Twitter, right? Twitter itself is not useful unless people participate in it. And we come to that point where everyone is comfortable enough to basically sign up and volunteer for it. And I think we're getting these early adopters right now, and it's just a matter of time before everyone gets comfortable with this technology.
So does anybody have a connected doorbell or a connected lock or monitor your house from your, Milton? Anybody else in there? Put your hands way up so we can get a sense. How many would consider that? Hands up. It's okay, you don't have to be embarrassed. We're all friends here. How many would pay for it? How many would, and what's the range? Like $5? Keep your hands up for those who said you'd pay. Like, would it be like $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month, $100 a month? No. So, I mean, the real question is really, who said 100? Did somebody say $100? You'd pay $100? Higher? But the question is what problem will it solve, right? Like, so you're willing to spend money on it. It's like fucking A, right? Write it down. Whoever just put their hand up, I'd like to talk to you because there's a business somewhere. But the problem is, what will it solve, right? So what is so wrong in your life right now that you would need something like this to be able to use the tool? So, guys, in order for this to be a business, in order for this to go out, you guys to go out and find something to do with this, it has to solve a problem, or does it?
Well, it certainly does, and I think that the early adoption of Internet of Things in manufacturing and business and municipalities is because there are real problems to solve, whether it be accessibility or sustainability or like real things like that. So for the individual, it will have to be it'll be maybe health, around health, or it'll be around security, feeling secure. But I think the things that are, sort of more frivolous, let's say talking stuffies, I think that's the kind of thing that, is going to be just for fun. But yeah, there are small problems that can be solved.
Anybody? Go ahead, Aisha.
Yeah, earlier in our discussion, we were talking about adoption, and that's kind of where your question went to see with the hands up with your doorbell. One of the things that we discussed was that to some degree, IoT is in our lives already, the doorbell being an example. It's already there, it's available. I'm purchasing a house that's coming with an alarm system that will tell me if my sump pump is not working, and therefore I'm about to have a flooded basement. These things are coming with, and that's why we are able to purchase them. We see a value in them. They're either free or low cost, because there was only one person who wanted to pay $100. So what kind of problems can we actually solve, and how would we actually even reach an adoption point that could be considered that tipping point? And some of the discussion that we just had was related to environmental solutions. So as an example, well, a lot of us decided that none of us were willing to pay a lot for purchasing that next washing machine until the current one broke, except for. And so one of the things we're seeing is that a lot of these solutions can make it into our lives through public sector, through businesses, either providing them to you free or at a savings to you, that a service that you see a benefit in. So if they come and take your old fridge, it's also a benefit to the hydro companies, right? They're seeing the savings, and you get to go get a new fridge that will give them the savings, but you as well. There's some kind of a tax incentive built in for having energy savings. So you have an incentive to adapt these sort of technologies that come through. But the businesses or the organizations or the governments that are proposing them also see some kind of a saving and incentive. And so that's kind of where we were having our discussion, that it could be a way that would increase usage, that would get us to that tipping point fairly quickly.
I'd also like to say that in terms of capacity, it's not just capacity in terms of user capacity, but also capacity in terms of technology capacity. So smart homes are a good example where you look at each individual device in itself probably has very low utility. So I could have a temperature sensor in rooms, I can have sensors in a window, I could have an occupancy sensor, and individually those aren't very useful. But when you combine them, they become very useful. So for example, if I know the temperature outside, I know the temperature inside, I can know whether or not that window should be open or should not be open. But individually, that window sensor itself isn't very useful. So once we have enough technologies that are sensing various different things within the house, it's that aggregate, I think, that where we're going to see solutions emerge.
Yeah, Rob, I wanted to speak to your point where it kind of sounded like you were hinting at IoT in the consumer space is like technology looking for a problem, right? Like we're seeing a lot of really gimmicky stuff that's emerging, and they're like, check this out, it does the exact same thing as it did before. It's a toaster, but now it emails you when your toast is done. And you're like, oh, that's gimmicky and stupid. Okay, so the other day, I'm on the internet,
No.
as I am often, and I see this like Kickstarter for laundry detergent, and the laundry detergent is like, just put this in the sun and then put it in your washing machine and it'll work. I'm like, that sounds pretty cool, right? Reusable laundry detergent. And then they're like, for $20 more, we're gonna put a Wi-Fi chip in this thing and tell you when your laundry is done and how efficient the laundry wash was and all this other stuff that like I probably don't actually care about. But for $20 more, like, hell yeah, right? Like, it's so cool. I can get up in front of 100 people and talk to them about this ridiculous thing that I own. I think like it's small things like this that we're gonna see push the like IoT into the consumer space. It's not gonna be like, oh, everyone's gonna have this like one killer app.
Right.
It's going to be more of like an emergent trend, and especially a lot of like DIY folks, like we're seeing all around here. Like you guys are the folks who are going to discover like this is really where IoT comes in as like a beautiful application, and then people are going to start getting really into that.
Is there thoughts out there, like are you guys, I see a question over there and there's a question there, but is there a movement for you guys? Are you exploring this avenue? Are you knee deep in a product? Is there anybody who's built product, who's building for IoT right now? Wow, that's telling. Is anybody thinking about it? Oh, it's coming. I'm just waiting for the right idea, right? Is it?
No, it's actually, we got it, but it's just the development
Okay.
in the next couple of months.
All right. That's. Do you want to share it, or is it too soon?
Well, it's, the product's already been announced, so,
Rob, could you repeat some of what's
Yep.
going on, or like pass the microphone on?
That's okay. Now you can use the mic.
Okay, thank you. So it's a predictive maintenance product. It's already been announced, so I can say that, right? And the first iteration of it will just be working with asset management tools. But then the next one is working with the Internet of Things and being able to bring sensor information in. And so this would be for instance, factory floors and that sort of thing. Yeah.
All right, great. Anybody else? No? This is your chance. It's free advertising. What's the name of the company? Do you want to say that? Oh, it's called IBM. Have you heard of them? Damn! Son of a gun. Is there anybody who's not IBM out there that has something cool?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, in the back.
In the back over there? Somewhere over there? All right, I'm going to get to you in a second. One of the things that we've seen, which is maybe an opening way here, is, if you want to bring it up, yeah, is around, have you heard of the Amazon Dash? Is this kind of like how we get these things into people's houses? So you think about, there's Amazon Echo, and then Amazon Dash, they're little buttons. Have you heard of these things? They're like connected buttons. So over the Wi-Fi network in your house, you attach them like a Tide button next to your washing machine, and when you push it, it orders Tide for you. Not lying. You've heard of you've heard of these? When I get a response like this, I don't know what that means. So it's either yes or no. Okay. Work
We
with me
haven't
here.
reached the tipping point.
No, I have not. I have not, clearly. Shit. So, that might be are those entrance ways here? Like, it can be that simple that we can be building these things for that simplicity?
I will say yes. Like from academia, as an example, we are seeing people coming to us that came up with an idea in a basement. And it's two guys came up with an idea, and they're building it. They managed to get investment. It's about to hit the market within months. And yes, I can't name them. But the point is that the do-it-yourself, come up with an idea, get it out there is, especially in IoT, is more accessible than it has been in the past for other waves. If you compare it to mobility as an example, that was not very easy to access from a cost point of view if you wanted to figure that out at home. But with IoT, you can purchase those sensors. You can build that circuit yourself. You can hook it up to your computer. You can set up a small server yourself and have your proof of concept and go out there and possibly have a consumer product.
All right, what product do you have?
Rob, I'm a speaker, so I'll be talking a little bit more this afternoon, but we connect cars. So we have upwards of 1 million cars connected. And we do that for a couple of purposes. Our vision path is a connected car. Part of it, as a company, we're an end-to-end solution. So we design devices, we ship them out, we do the logistics, we do the system integration, we take the data and move that forward. So we've used that beachhead to do a number of things. So our vision path is a connected car. Our revenue path is we sell it, first of all, to insurance companies to track. But as an Internet of Things, is that once you have a beachhead in a car, like in the office or the house, you can build off that beachhead. So we sell human-to-machine interaction. So the car is a traveling Wi-Fi hotspot. So we allow you to read your emails and texts safely by voice-powered, or we use power to the vehicle. So we are building a connected car and funding it by a number of initiatives. on there. So it's an end-to-end solution.
And you're not GM or IBM, so
It's
that's
a
fine.
company, it's a three-letter company started with I, and it's IMS.
Okay,
and
good. It's not. All right, thank you. So what are some of the companies that you guys are looking at right now that you think, I've named a couple, right, that are just, you look at it and you think, oh, I wish I had invented that, or it's so cool. I mean, Edwards laundry detergent is one of those companies, right, I suppose. So why don't we start down this path, because I'm really interested in what the companies you're...
One of the cool examples I came across at a presentation that was done by a couple of people at Macadamian, and really connected with is this house, and it came out of LA, and you buy a bunch of little houses that come with one big house, and if you tap one of them, the other one will light up, or the other ones will light up anywhere in the world. And so that's a connected product that helps people stay in touch with kids if they're traveling with their spouse, or roommates, just to let them know just by a simple touch that, hey, I'm on my way home, or I woke up because I'm in an 8-hour different time zone. Are you awake? Let's talk. So it's for people who travel a lot or have families and loved ones in different parts of the world. It's kind of a very cute, emotional product that's out there. Kind of like the button for the machine, but more emotional.
Adrian, do you have anything that any companies that you've seen?
My adaptation as a consumer is I guess a bit weird, in that I adopt technology with the knowledge that I'm not going to use it for any good use, I guess. And so I often buy a bunch of things that I'm just like, that's kind of cool, let's see what it does. But realize I'm like most consumers where I'm just kind of lazy. So I'll buy my running watch is a good example. I buy a running watch and I'm like, oh, for an extra, I think it was like $200, I can get a heart rate monitor. And that will connect to the internet and tell me how am I doing. And then I can't bother to put that on because it's, even though I'm going to run like a half marathon, I can't be bothered to put a strap on because it takes too much time. And that's kind of the reality I see for myself, but as well as for a number of other people, which at a consumer level, it sounds cool and we buy it and that Fitbit remains in our drawers. I think the biggest thing that we see right now is an industry where we're looking at efficiencies in business models. We look at for big infrastructure things like the Confederation Bridge, for example, is well connected, lots of data coming out of there. But these are big things where we have that kind of capacity. On the consumer level, I think we're seeing little early adopters right now. I'm waiting for something to take a hold, and we'll see it.
I think there was Dom mentioned a product, a company called Ecobee earlier today. They have the products right up here. I remember looking at them a few years ago, and they had this connected wall socket that you could, a DIYer could, a home rental person could install, and it did both connecting to other plugs, but also back to a dashboard. Now, I think it was early days, and it was hard for someone to, sort of hack into or look, to play with. But I think there's still a huge opportunity in connected wall outlets. One where you could label them and control the power and monitor the power that's used throughout the house. I think in terms of home automation, I think there's still a lot of opportunity for a company like Ecobee.
Edward, do you have another example of a company that you're excited about?
I'm still kind of thinking about this, but I think another company or organization really that I'm excited to see get into the IoT space is the government of Canada. I think that I think it would be a dystopian society in which I wish that devices produced by my government were living inside of my house. But I think it would be really cool.
It's okay, because they're already in your pocket, so it's not
Please
that
don't talk
far.
to me about that stuff. I just prefer not to think about it. But on a more serious note, I mean, governments, public services, have all sorts of amazing ability to influence large groups of people that may be apathetic about a thing. And so if they're like, hey, it is really important for us to have greater efficiency of power and water usage, and they make it easy for consumer companies to start filling the needs and gaps that the government of Canada have identified as these are things that our society wants and will make us a better, group in general, like that's super exciting to me.
Just to add on that, I think the opportunity for that is already kind of there. We see smart meters already in our homes that outside people can control to basically balance power usage at the city level. Some of my research was also looking at power that goes into the home. And based on the power signatures that are coming in, we can identify different devices that are being used within the home. So I can tell when your computer is being turned on, when your refrigerator goes on, when your stove turns on. And that they're monitoring that power already coming in. Same thing with the water usage. I can tell when you're taking a shower, when the toilet flushes, just by the water usage signal there. And so as soon as that gets connected, there's a whole bunch of things that couldn't be done before that we can do. And so this is where we see that kind of emergent kind of solutions come about.
I think on an institutional side, I mean, we have federal government, municipal government, smart cities, but also, in this audience too, we have universities, museums, all these places that are moving mass amounts of people every day, and to create a connected, seamless experience as they travel throughout and interact with these spaces, I think is a huge opportunity too.
We got a question over there?
Yeah, I actually have a question with regard to connectivity and the future of it. Thinking in terms of the way the cell phone has evolved from in the early days now to where everyone had their own way of their own operating system, and now it's polarized into, let's face it, iOS and Android. So on that basis, I was just thinking, we're sort of still in the early days of IoT, and it's kind of a wild, wild west out there. And was wondering if you had any thoughts in terms of the way, the industry would be moving towards in terms of adopting a set of common standards, or in fact, an operating environment of sorts, so to speak.
Do we need an IoT OS?
I think I'll take that first. There's
a little closer there.
Sure.
Yeah.
I see there's a couple things that are emerging right now, and they're all coming through in consortiums. One thing is they announced, a big group announced recently that they're putting in an IoT network, IoT 3G network. It's going to be low bandwidth, small packets all across the United States, so that there's going to be that cell infrastructure to do IoT. And then there's also the Nest group recently launched a consortium called the Thread Group, which will be, again, a consortium, an agreement between major manufacturers. I think Samsung's on board, Yale Locks is on board, and they're going to work together. So I think what we're going to see is these consortiums that come up that will to agree upon the OS and agree upon protocols and all that.
You all don't have to answer that. Go ahead, Edwin.
Yeah, I think it's very important to recognize that standards are going to emerge and that we're going to take advantage of things like IPv6, but what's always going to work is running code. And that's something that's shared freely, I think that's really where standards are going to come from, especially in problem spaces that we haven't really finished exploring.
That's well said.
It was just from our earlier conversation where we were discussing that the way IoT is there right now, it is in small pockets and silos. And so this does need to be addressed, and sure, there will be standards that come up, but I do think that a lot of it will come through partnerships like Brett just went over, as well as we might have a phase of, as you said, the Wild West of just figuring that out. Happened with mobility. We settled on a couple of OSs that ended up being the main ones that you ended up citing. But when everyone jumps on a new trend or a new market, there is a little bit of that figuring out time, and the same will happen here.
I think just to close out that question, the biggest challenge that we have with an IoT OS is the fact that it's standardized. And I think that that's a challenge. So what Edward said is very pressing here, is around the quickest way to get something out is to code the damn thing and get it out the door. And it's probably the best, because if you wait for standards, there's a homogeny that happens, right? And I think that at the end of the day, we are on a linear path. All the conversations we've had here and the conversations that you're talking about is like how we do things today And plus IoT equals how we'll do something tomorrow. But the companies that are innovating in this place right now don't look at how we're doing shit today. They're thinking about how we should be doing it tomorrow and then applying it tomorrow and forgetting about the way we do it today. So if we are on a linear track where you think, okay, where we're going to proceduralize this, and then we're going to add sensors to this, and then we're going to connect it, and we're going to collect data, and then it's an evolution. It's not innovation, it's evolution, and then we're going to be doing the same thing 10 years from now, except everybody's going to be collecting data. So the challenge of an IoT OS is that just go and fucking build it, and then maybe your platform will be the one that dominates because you've thought about it differently, right? And I think that that's the important thing that we have to get from here, is that IoT isn't little tiny little steps. It's a big step. And I think we're all waiting for that one thing that says, okay, for some reason gives us permission to go and do it. But what we're saying up here, everybody is saying, just go do it. Because the ideas that you have, maybe they're not linear, they will be the game changers. And I think that that's the thing to remember. So we got a question over there. Is there another question? Yeah? Go ahead. Oh, no.
Hey, pal. So the question is, will the absurdity of the IoT interactions hurt credibility of the movement and slow adoption and support for it? And then from there, how do we manage that change in better ways? So going back to Leo's example from this morning, that you need a cell phone app to turn off a light.
I feel like that's a pretty loaded question.
Yes?
So,
Just say
like-
yes. Yeah.
Do we even need to talk about that? Like, people are going to make weird stuff. Sometimes people are going to consider it an art form. That is okay. If you don't want to use it and it's not hurting anybody else, it's going to be okay. There's going to be someone like else who's going to make a more subtle, like better fit solution for them. Yeah, I don't really know how to speak to that.
Does anybody want to tackle that?
Go ahead.
I'll tackle it from one thing that I'm looking forward to, which is that this is a space that's just taking off. It's accessible to do-it-yourselfers. It's accessible to businesses, enterprises. Everybody wants in on it, and that means that there actually can be a lot of creativity. Some of it will be like your question is asking, and may not be optimal or could harm other people, absolutely. But there's also going to be a lot of creative solutions that we haven't even thought of yet. It might end up leading to things that are happenstance. One of the things that I mentioned to the group before that I'm also looking to see will this new wave bring to the world is when we went into mobile and cell phone, one of the things that happened in the world is that countries like Brazil realized they didn't need to build telephone infrastructure that was actual lines in the physical lines in their country. They could actually build cell phone towers, and suddenly remote communities were connected. It made a huge difference in many parts of the world, whether it was to a farmer, whether it was to a fisherman, and that was something that wasn't expected. It was something that happened. We, as a world, had this fabulous change happen, this fabulous new technology come across, and found a use for it. And so for IoT, there is a new layer of infrastructure. Will it actually make that kind of a difference in the world and in countries?
I think there's two parts to this. I think there's the perception and there's the reality. And the reality, I think, is that IoT has been growing for a long time, and it's going to continue to grow at a fairly good pace, and it's exponentially going to grow. I think the perception, though, is that it's a relatively new thing. There's going to be a lot of excitement in a very short period of time. Expectations are going to be very high from what we see in movies, right? And say that this is what the Internet of Things is going to be like. Then we're going to see a dip as things aren't like the movies. The reality is that the Internet of Things are still going to grow in the background. Perception is going to go really high, go back down, and then we're going to reach that steady state that we've seen with a lot of technologies where we think, oh, this is the next revolution, and then people get kind of disappointed, and then it just happens. And I think we're going to see the same thing here.
Okay, I had to think about this question a little bit more and stop being a little angry. Sorry. I think it's very easy.
Was that you angry?
Wow. I think it's really easy to be cynical about new things. I think it's really easy to point at the kid in your class who's like wearing his hat in a funny way and be like, look at that weirdo. That person is wearing their hat in not the same way. And they're like, you know, and so I kind of see like IoT in a similar space. Like, I totally understand where you're coming from. Like, it is very easy to see, like, look at all this gimmicky shit that we're making. We're putting the internet in it. Like, that is a joke. It is totally a punchline. But I think that if we're gonna embrace this, like, the way to do it is just to recognize that, like, first of all, no one's ever gonna buy a thing because it has, like, the IoT in it. They're gonna buy it because, like, it's gonna help them do something interesting or, like, make them laugh or something along those lines. I don't think it's a thing that we need to really worry about. And, like, if you are interested in helping this whole IoT thing along, just, like, go and build something awesome, you know?
I think that's a good way. There's a question over there, and then I think we'll wrap up with final statements.
The Germany has its Industry 4.0 initiative. It's government-led, and you look in North America, we have the Industrial Internet Consortium. So we've got on the industrial side, we've got some initiatives that are underway aimed at taking the Internet of Things into the industrial area. So, and there's obviously money to be made there, so they're driving standards and such there. So I'm wondering, is there concern that, say, one area, industry in this case, is going to get far ahead and it's going to end up setting the standards, and which might become the default that isn't necessarily going to work as well in other areas, but everybody's going to get forced down following this one route because one area has either thrown a lot of money at it or considered a lot of resources or just moved so far down the standards process that everybody feels like they have to follow.
Like Windows?
Yeah.
You said
Apple, yeah. I mean, I think people willingly buy up Apple stuff to control their lives and to run their lives. I think we'll see it with other companies like Samsung or other consortiums under a different name, but it's really driven by the same kind of sort of corporations.
What I would, and seriously, just software background, so I went Windows as well. But what I, yes, they are. Sure they are. So what I wanted to say is that don't forget that even though standards exist, it doesn't mean that new standards don't make it. It doesn't mean that improved standards don't show up. It doesn't mean that open source doesn't exist. So there will be, sure, some people got there first and created this standard that works for industry in Germany, but I'm pretty sure there'll be other partners like the consortium you mentioned that might come up with a different standard, as well as people that are do-it-yourselfers and put something out there and it just took off for the open source community as an example.
Mm-hmm.
One more question, man?
Hey there. You asked a question earlier on about people, how many people here are building internet-enabled products, and I think it's almost a yesterday's way of thinking about it. Where if you look at a business like the hydro companies they're not in the business of building internet-enabled products, but they're using IoT technologies to allow them to deliver their traditional value better, where they can remotely control the temperature in your house, and you can too, which allows them users to experience the power delivery product that's their core focus better in a new way with an Internet of Things technology.
Right.
So I think if you ask the question and almost no one said they could, what I think it's interesting to think that if you've got users or customers that are connected and you've got a product or service, it's a good conversation to take part in, not that you have to come up with something new. You can use an Internet of Things technology to do what you've always been doing better.
This is
So
a great
it's not a
statement.
matter of
Yeah.
it's not a matter of having to build a product. It's looking at what you're always doing in a new and efficient way.
It's beautiful. That is beautiful. All right, last statements. When you think, is there anything else that you guys want to just finish off with, inspirational, segue to end this in this conversation?
Well, I would build on what Dan was saying, in that we need to almost embrace this with open arms, because there are a lot of benefits in terms of sustainability, accessibility, connected cities that will allow us to reduce congestion in traffic, will allow us to have access to data, health data on our loved ones. I think that there's real benefits, and it'll come from embracing and approaching with an open mind?
I think the success of Internet of Things depends on two things. One is a strong infrastructure in terms of the network, and the second thing is things that go in and outside of it. And the infrastructure is being built by kind of these bigger companies and stuff like that. And it already exists. What's different from what things were in the past is that what goes into it and what comes out of it, it's now can be built in a garage now. And so this is a very different kind of space that we see, where it's not going to be waiting for a large company necessarily to build those little pieces at the end. This is different in that it's going to come from potentially consumers directly themselves. And I think this is kind of an interesting kind of space.
I am extremely excited about what is happening in this room right now. So, makers everywhere, here especially in Ottawa, I implore you to listen to your inner Shia LaBeouf. Don't let your dreams be dreams. Just do it.
So first, I just wanted to address the comment that the person had just made.
Dan?
I have no
Dan.
idea.
Yeah.
Dan, thank you. And that's to say, absolutely, at Macadamia and some of the IoT customers that we're working with, it is definitely about delivering the value they've always delivered in either a different way or a better way, and using IoT to do that. And for the inspirational closing message, one of the things that this panel discussed right before, we all agreed, and you can say if you didn't, that IoT has always sort of been here. Those things have always been around. But the difference now is that it's got a label. It's got a label called IoT, and it's a trend, and everyone wants to do something about it. And so that means that there is absolutely an opportunity for us as do-it-yourselfers, makers, as well as businesses and enterprise to go out there and do something about it.
That is a perfect way to end. Thank you guys for doing this. Give them a round of applause for being here.